Hi everyone, and welcome to our panel 3 for our Women in Health Tech series as part of the podcast The Only Way is Ethics. And I'd like to welcome today some fantastic guests, and thank you all of you for giving your time to come and join us on this. We've been really excited to do this initiative, and I know everyone's been looking forward to it. So we have Liz Ashall-Payne, we have Misbah Mahmood, and we have Jess Morley as well, who are joining us. Welcome all three of you. And I will now give the opportunity for everyone to introduce themselves, say who they are and their roles within digital health. And as we do that, we're just going to get a little bit of information from everyone around their journeys into digital health, their backgrounds, and then we'll kick off into some interesting topics and discussions about women in health tech, and the challenges and triumphs, and some of those areas. So if I could hand over to Liz first, just to give us a bit about your background.
Yeah, of course. So first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to join this panel. It's a real honour. So Liz Ashall-Payne. I do wear a few hats, but the main hat I wear is founding chief exec at ORCHA. My other hats are also around supporting Tech UK's board, representing SMEs, and I also sit on Tech UK's Health and Social Care Council. I'm also a mentor on the NHS England's Clinical Entrepreneur Programme, and I'm also very honoured to say that I'm an honorary research fellow at Warwick University and UCLan as well. I didn't start my career doing any of those things, and if you'd have asked me 30 years ago, did I think that they would be my role titles, I certainly wouldn't have thought so. So I started my career as a speech and language therapist working in the NHS, quite a long time ago now. It's quite scary when I think about the numbers, but when I was 21, working in clinic in complex paediatric care. And for me, right from day one, I felt really frustrated with the fact that you can only see one patient at a time as a clinician. And it really spurred me on to want to work differently and think about how we can, as a system, help more patients and people access healthcare. So that took me on a journey of lean thinking, system transformation, change management, and then ultimately got really fascinated with the opportunities that were presented when it came to digital health, and then equally got quite frustrated with some of the lack of systems that were available for us to access trusted technologies. And ORCHA was founded nearly 10 years ago.
Wow, 10 years.
That's great. It goes fast.
Yeah, thank you for that, Liz. And Jess, if we could sort of hand over to you now.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me, and apologise for the state of my voice. I don't normally sound quite so gravelly, although I will say that this is not as bad as the time that I recorded a podcast the day after I'd seen the Taylor Swift Eras tour. That was bad planning on my part. Turns out if you scream for 3.5 hours, it doesn't do well for your voice. Anyway, so I'm Jess. I am a postdoctoral researcher at the Yale Digital Ethics Centre. I have been here for the last year, but as you can probably tell from my voice, even despite the layers of gravel, I am not American, I am British. I've spent most of my career in the NHS and in the health tech system in the UK. Very similarly to Liz, I didn't start out with the intention of becoming somebody who works in health tech. I actually originally have an undergrad degree in geography, as I was obsessed with rivers and volcanoes, but also human geography. And in my last year as an undergrad, which again, to date myself, is going back to sort of 2012, 2013 now, I was like, I will I really wanted to do a research project on the impact of digital technologies on the spread of cultural ideas and whether or not that was speeding up the process. So that was kind of my first, I guess, foray into tech. I then left uni when I thought that was going to be a permanent thing. And my parents also thought that was going to be a permanent thing. And I went to work for the NHS for Richmond CCG, actually at the time when it was transitioning from PCT to CCG. So from Primary Care Trust to Clinical Care Commissioning Group for people who don't speak NHS alphabet soup. And I was supposed to be there for 6 weeks, basically doing data analysis. So we're picking up on my statistics skills from my geography degree. And then I sort of never left. I stayed there for nearly 2 years. Then I went and did consulting for a bit, which I hated. I felt like I was selling my soul. All credit to anybody who does that, but I couldn't stand it. So I went back to work for the Department of Health and Social Care. And I was a HealthTech advisor in the digital team. We worked on a whole range of different policies, from things like the NHS app to actually, which is where I think I've first come across the work of Liz, like how we rate the apps, and that was on the NHS apps library. But at the time, I guess things started to really pick up and become quite obsessive with AI. This was like 2017. And I became the AI subject matter expert for what was NHSX. That sounds like a really impressive title. It literally meant that I could write a line of code and no one else in the building could. So they were like, you can write code, therefore you must know what AI is. Great. After doing that for about 6 months, we did things like write the NHS Code of Conduct for data-driven health and care tech. I started to feel like a fraud. And as if we were making decisions based on topics that no one really understood. I didn't really understand. We were sort of being taken by a ride by the big tech companies. And so my solution to that was, I'll go back to school. So I went back to do my master's degree. Originally, the plan was that I'd do that part-time. So I'd do it over 2 years in social science of the internet, focusing specifically on health, digital health. Halfway through that 2 years, COVID hit. I also started working for the university. So I started working for Oxford for what is now the Bennett Institute for Applied Data Science. We built this big digital platform called Open Safely. At the end of 2020, I started my PhD. My PhD is specifically about how do you deploy AI into the NHS in a way that is both technically feasible and ethically justifiable. I finished that in January of last year, and I moved over to the States to continue doing essentially that, looking at how do you use AI in digital health in a way that is both technically feasible and ethically justifiable. And that's where I am now.
That's fantastic. And I've been scribbling some notes because we'll pick up on some of those bits, Jess. Miss Bar, over to you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honour to be here. Listening to your guys' journeys is just so amazing. So I am a midwife by background. So I've been a midwife for 10 years and kind of fell into digital like everybody does. So naively, I got a 6-month secondment as a digital midwife to implement a maternity EPR in 6 months, thinking that was clearly going to be possible. And then never left 7 years later. So I was a digital midwife at Leeds teaching and implemented a maternity EPR and really fell in love with digital and realised that I was making a difference on a bigger scale, and fell in love with data and realised how much we can really utilise the data to improve the care that we're providing to women and their families in Leeds. And I remember when I went for my interview to be a digital midwife and I got asked, are you sure you want to do this because you're very new in your career? And I was like, absolutely, I'm really excited. And I'm so glad that I stuck with that because it's really took me down a path that I never thought I would go down ever. Like, same as you, Liz, if someone asked me 10 years ago when I qualified, did I want to go into digital? I'd probably be like, I don't even know what that is. Of course not. Like, I wouldn't ever want to do that, but absolutely fell in love with it. Was a digital midwife for 3-4 years. And then had the opportunity to apply for a Florence Nightingale Digital Leadership Scholarship. And that, I always say, was forever grateful to Florence, because that gave me the wings. I always felt like I wanted to do more, but didn't really know where to go, what to do, because we didn't really have a career pathway for clinicians in digital. And we kind of just like made it up as we go along. There's like networks up and coming, but nothing was really there. There wasn't like a structured pathway. So doing the Florence Nightingale Scholarship really opened up a lot of opportunities for me, opened up a lot of doors, really gave me the confidence to be able to fly and go into the digital world and not be so scared. And from that, I joined the digital health advisory panel. So I was the first midwife to be on the advisory panel. Again, the networking opportunities, mentorship opportunities, and were really, really good, and really gave me the opportunity. I remember when I did my Florence Nightingale Scholarship, I'd said to Gemma Stacey at the time, where's the midwifery information officers? Why are they all nursing information officers? And she said to me, well, you can make it happen. And so I did. So I became the first ever midwifery information officer in England. And that was just so amazing, because it meant that I could create that career pathway for new digital midwives that were starting. And there was somewhere where we could go, and joined as part of the digital midwives expert reference group. And then I stepped into the Deputy Chief Midwifery Information Officer role at least for 2 years. And then really made me realise the transferable skills that I had, because I went from just doing maternity to focusing on quite a lot of the other clinical service units. And I'm really proud to say that currently I'm on secondment as the CXIO and First Clinical Safety Officer at Bradford District Care Trust, which is a community mental health trust, which again is completely out of my comfort zone. Dean knows this, because I'm always messaging him. And it's made me really realise again the transferable skills that I've got, and the difference that I can make. But again, I was a midwife on the shop floor, went into digital, had no idea what I was going into, had no qualifications. No one teaches you this at university. I had, my midwifery skills and managing a ward, etc. And it wasn't until I was about 4 or 5 years into a digital career that I went off and did like a PG cert in digital maternity leadership, did my Prince 2 qualification, and did all of this after already being in a digital role. But I think it's really important, and I'm a big fan of mentorship. So I do mentoring for the Florence Nightingale programme, and also digital health as well. So paying back, because mentorship has really helped and supported me in my career.
Thank you for that, Ms. Barr, and it's great. I'm going to kick off the conversation in a minute, but I'm very conscious that sort of I introduce everybody else, and everyone's probably there saying, "Who is this person?" Introducing everybody, and I don't introduce me. For those of you that don't know, so Dean Mawson, I'm a nurse by background, 33 years, Barkinghaven and Redbridge. I still practice there intermittently. I, again, like Ms. Barr, fell into digital. I became digital lead for an interim EPR project at the Trust back in 2005 now. So sort of 20 years ago, during the National Programme for IT, for those of us that remember that. Back in the day, I've been in digital health for 18 years. So I worked for an EPR supplier as well, IMS Maxim, for 11 of those as part of the product team. So well rehearsed around the whole design development lifecycle. And as part of that role, I was a clinical safety officer, and have been since 2008, around that time, and set up the whole clinical risk management governance structure, etc. In that, so that's me. I sit on the BCS, Clinical Safety Special Interest Group Leadership Committee. I'm published on NHS Digital, only a short piece on operational clinical risk management, which has since been archived. As NHS Digital liked to do, archive these very useful documents, but some of us still go and find them and brush off the dust and use them, because they still stand the test of time. So that's me. It's really interesting listening to sort of like all three of you introduce yourself and give your stories, and sort of like, picking up on some. There's always an expectation, isn't there, that we are experts in. Sometimes we get given titles, or someone says to you, "Oh, you do that." Like Jess, you were saying, you can do a bit of code. You're an AI expert, and all of a sudden it's like, well, okay, that's fantastic. And, you know, I know myself and Ms. Bar, you saying about falling into digital, you know, Liz as in that sort of, you know, sort of therapies sort of, you know, background. And yes, we all look at, don't we? Surely we can do something better with digital, etc. And it's pushing that forward because we have an interest. And I think all of us in something in common is that passion, isn't it? About sort of, you know, in whatever field we're in, is around making that change. So I come from nursing background, predominantly very outnumbered in relation to sort of women within healthcare. For me, I found it absolutely fantastic in being supported by lots of women with a passion, caring in relation to that and in relation to what they do. Now, if I put that over into digital health in relation to what we're doing, what we're trying to achieve. Now, Ms. Bar, you mentioned about sort of like roles within digital, and I think it's fair to say that not just within identifying clinical roles within digital, because you said around sort of like, you know, the birth of some of these, you know, the CNIO, CCIO, etc., and those sort of roles, and the informaticians. But I think whether everyone sort of may agree with me or may not, I think the whole digital landscape has progressed and is still progressing and still finding its feet in relation to not just clinical roles and the definition of those roles, but I think all of the roles within digital, within healthcare. And we're still on that journey. And obviously with that comes challenges. Throwing this out there and probably putting the cat amongst the sort of pigeons. Maybe a bit easier for the men out there who have predominantly taken on these roles and these senior roles historically. But how do you see that being sort of like a challenge in relation to women in health tech and picking up these roles and moving those roles forward and defining those roles? So what would you think the challenges are for women in digital health?
I just wanted to pick up on something that you said, though. I think things are better, and actually I think it's because of digital. And what I mean by that is it's far easier now to find a network of people that look like me than it was before we had things like social media and digital platforms. So, you know, I want to recognise that never before has it been easier to reach out to those networks and for those networks to find a home very, very quickly.
Yeah.
I do think that there are some challenges, and if you take a very factual challenge around the amount of funding that female leaders receive for in this space, and actually just in business generally, from the data that I've been told, women receive less than 1% of all funding in this country.
Wow.
And so there is, and I think part of the reason is and I don't think it's purposeful. I can't imagine that there's groups of men out there saying we don't want to give this funding to women. I'm not saying for that, but of course there is then an unconscious bias that happens. And of course, how women behave is quite different to how men behave. The language we use is quite different. And therefore, if you're walking into a pitch environment and you are feminine in your approach, that probably isn't going to land in the same way that a male approach would. And then, so that's a very factual thing that we do need to change. And also what we don't see is a huge amount of women in the investor community. And so there's very few women talking to women. So we're on a journey and it's improving, but that is a real fact. And I think the other thing that I just want to pick up on is, as a woman, we do balance far more certain responsibilities. So being a carer, and when you're pregnant and when you have young children, you know, I'm you know, I'm not going to be going to the pub of an evening. I'm going to be coming home, and I'm not saying that all men do that, but you know what I mean.
No.
But it's just that sometimes a lot of these deals are done outside of office hours, and as a woman you might be rushing back, and maybe our social construct isn't quite as fit for purpose for women as it is for men. And I just want to also say that some of that gender bias, I think we all had to challenge ourselves on it. So I know for me at ORCHA, when we were going out trying to recruit for coders, and Jess obviously shared that she is one of those beautiful female coders, of which there aren't many, but I was really keen that we had a balanced workforce of male and female. And what I actually got somebody to come in and look at was any bias that was within the role description, because it was a man that was writing the role description and he wasn't trying to be biased. And actually what happened was we got the role description rewritten without that bias, and we definitely attracted more women. So I think we should all challenge ourselves, really, even if we think we're trying to be open and equitable, maybe we're not.
Yeah, just picking up on that, I completely agree with Liz. I think it is, there are definitely challenges in both the healthcare and tech industry have generally been male dominated, and being a woman and a woman of colour, I feel like I've really had to prove my worth and prove my space within the digital health industry. And obviously being a midwife as well, so digital maternity was quite new and up and coming. So, you know, quite often I'd go to conferences and it'd be mainly like white British male middle-aged men on the panels, you know, doing the panels, chairing the panels, and you know, I would feel like sometimes, you know, right at the beginning of my career when I was still new to it, I'd be like, oh, like, what am I doing here? Like, where do I fit? Where do I belong? Like, where do I see people like me within the industry? But I think as time has gone on, naturally, like Liz said, it has started to evolve. And now when I go to conferences and stuff like that, like, I'm so pleased when I see, like, you know, like so many women on the panel and chairing, and I myself have chaired like so many sessions at like Rewired and stuff. And I think it's really important. And I think I've been really lucky because I've had some really strong female leaders as my mentors and really supported and guided me as well. And to be fair, I've met some, you know, good male leaders as well that have always like taught me and stood by me. But I think the gender bias is really real. It is getting better, but it still does exist. I think in my career, I mean, I'm going to say it now because I say it all the time, but my favourite quote is, if there's no seat at the table, bring your own chair. And quite often I have had to do that. Like, I've had to bring my chair with me or stand on the table quite often and break down them barriers and literally knock down them doors to get there. Sometimes it is difficult because you are faced with a brick wall. But I think it's important that, you know, we all stick together as women and keep fighting and breaking down them barriers.
No, absolutely, Ms. Barr. And Jess, I'd like to pick up on what sort of like Liz was saying around sort of like, you know, that whole bias. You're in that space, that AI space now, and obviously you went from this coder sort of, and then all of a sudden you're sort of like, you know, you've put yourself forward and you've done so much in sort of like in the space around AI and ethics in that space. So gender bias, I mean, that must be, you must be exposed to sort of like some of that and that work and sort of how is that sort of like affected in relation to what you're doing, and have you seen anything of sort of like, you know, what is there of interest in relation to gender bias in relation to AI, and is it affected by or related to what Liz was talking about, and Ms. Barr in certain respects?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are sort of multiple different points in it. So
yeah.
Pick up on what Liz was saying first. So there is a massive problem, and I should also say I'm not a professional software developer. I'm a social scientist who can do software development.
Who can do something,
but with an enormous amount of help from Stack Overflow. But when we were, for example, when we were building Open Safely at the Bennett Institute, one of the things we were really trying to do was to say exactly like what Liz was saying. We really wanted to try and have as balanced a team from a software development perspective as possible. And we did all of this stuff. You know, we had the job descriptions checked for gendered language, we went through, so universities in the UK have this thing called the Athena Swan, which is basically like accreditation for gender equality. We had them checked. We advertised through sort of forums that are specifically targeting women, and also specifically targeting women of color. So we went to Ada's list, we went through one HealthTech forum, we went through everything, and still I would say that we ended up with a software development team that is probably 80% male, and the reason for that is because the problem starts so much further in the chain. Like the women and girls in particular are turned off the foundations of tech skills much earlier on in life. Like they are told, for example, whether it be subliminally or directly, maths is not for you. That's my foundation is really maths and statistics. But you are told very clearly that's not what's targeted for you. You're supposed to do girly subjects. Like don't go and why are you doing English? Or history or anything that's the sort of the humanities, whereas physics and mathematics and all of this type of stuff is definitely targeted at men. Like if you go and see, like even if I was to walk across the campus like 10 minutes down the road from here and I was to walk into the computer science department and look at the kids who are in there now, they would be predominantly men. So it's much harder to catch up that barrier when you are then trying to do things at the recruitment stage. We're obviously I'm in America, where you've got an insane president who apparently thinks that helicopter crashes are attributed to the fact that we have DEI initiatives in the country. So we're also definitely going backwards in the context that I am currently in. But then, so that's sort of one tranche of things. Then in terms of my own experiences of dealing, I guess, with the whole being a woman thing and the sexism thing, I think there are sort of two parallels to me that I struggle with. One is the fact that it has almost certainly shaped every single thing about my experience. The number of times I have come across very overt sexism and the extent to which you have to, exactly like Mishba was saying, stand on the table and like bang my fist that you will take me seriously. Like I know that I look like I'm 15 and you think that you can use this as an excuse to try and talk down to me or dismiss me, but I'm going to bang on my table. And there have been multiple times like there was a case, for example, when I was still in the Department of Health, and a tech company had come in. They wanted to basically pitch their solution to the Department of Health to like try and get some backing, and I'd been in liaison with them for months, and then when they came in, they refused to speak to me. They were like, oh well, they were like, we don't want to talk to you, we want someone. Specifically, they wanted the minister, who was a man. They were like, we're not going to speak to you, we need somebody who is more senior, but what they mean is more male. There was a similar time when I was the person who was responsible for writing a big policy at work, and it was me who'd written the thing. I'd organized the meeting, I'd done all of this type of stuff, and then I was introduced in the meeting as the person who'd bought the biscuits. So there has been numerous examples of that. The conflict that exists in me is that's obviously shaped my whole entire experience, but then it also kind of cheeses me off when we then have to have conversations about what is it like to be a woman, because I'm like, that's the least interesting thing about me. It's like, yes, I am a woman, it shapes my experiences, it definitely defines things, but I would much rather you have a conversation with me about my work and my opinions and all of that type of stuff. But because we still have all of these layers of sexism still in place, you have to have these kind of conversations first. So that contradiction, I think, is also something that's interesting to deal with. And then the third and final bit that I guess I will pick up on is in academia. It's weird because me being a woman, definitely I still experience an enormous amount of sexism in my sort of day-to-day life. But when you publish, you're very gender neutral, because I publish as Morley J right? So there's no way of knowing unless you were to go and click in and say that, you see that my name is Jessica, and that totally changes your experience, because you then people are responding only to what's written, and you are completely non-gendered, which is really interesting.
It's fascinating. It's sort of like sitting here and sort of like listening to all these different perspectives. And you picked up, Jess, on the whole, which I must be completely honest, that whole, when you say sort of like it's at that earlier stage when girls and sort of like are sort of pushed towards other subjects rather than the sciences and maths, etc. And I know, Liz, you know, you put on one of your things about that whole next generation and encouraging girls and young women to enter STEM. And I've actually written down, for people that don't know what STEM is: science, technology, engineering, maths. And I've learned something new in relation. I'll hold my hand up. Sort of, I didn't know what STEM was in relation to that, and that whole sort of like pushing that forward in HealthTech and healthcare, which is really, really interesting. So, what can we do because we're advocates, we're ambassadors, aren't we? In relation to that, what can we do, and what are we doing for the sort of audience in relation to like pushing this forward and making sure that things improve? Really picking up on that sort of like girls and young women being able to sort of and promoting that.
Can I give you an example of a piece of work that we did at ORCHA? And we didn't set out with this agenda in mind. We were thinking, how can we get great digital health technologies into the hands of communities? And we talked about the fact that children are brilliant at spreading viruses, as we were saying earlier, Jess. We said, could we get into the curriculum, share information about great digital health technologies and get them to go viral by taking them home to their families and loved ones? Now, what was really interesting was, and it was part of the PSHE part of the curriculum that they have to do. Now, what was really interesting was we then saw this huge volume, and we were doing this across hundreds of schools, of young women who'd been interested in health and had never heard of digital health. And what happened was these women who were almost being introduced to nurse careers, medical careers, therapist careers, now said, I didn't even know that there were careers in digital health. What careers are there? And so what started off as a program of work to embed digital health actually went completely in a different direction. And we had a whole load of podcasts and videos of women talking about jobs that they're doing in this space. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because, again, it's nobody's fault. It's a systemic issue. The people who are in schools, they also don't know that these jobs exist. The careers advisors have never heard probably of digital health. And they've certainly never met, me, Ms. Barr or Jess or any of the other women out there. And so I think, one of the things that I've done quite a few times now is I've gone into schools and I've been asked to give a presentation. Now, quite often they're asking me to talk about what it is like to be an entrepreneur and build a business. Well, I don't see that as the opportunity. I see the opportunity to go in and speak to young people about how you can be really interested in a topic and then divert into another area like technology. And for women, and to show girls in that school a picture of a woman in that role, because if we can't see one, we can't aspire to be it. And I think that every woman that I've met in this space is passionate about that. And I think we're all doing something that might feel quite little, but collectively it's shifting how we interact with each other and how we support young girls through the system.
I think it's interesting when you look at the population of, say, just taking nurses, midwives, is predominantly women. And if we're saying that sort of, people aren't pushed in, aren't sort of like, don't gravitate towards the sciences, etc., is that those roles are scientific or are sort of science-based as a nature. However, there's that caring. I think the gravitation, isn't it, is that sort of that caring nature, that caring side, as mothers, as daughters, as sort of like in relation to midwifery. It's an interesting point.
Can I just say one other thing, just because you just raised a really good point. I'm a mum to 2 boys, and I think it's also really important that we help young men and men. And this is one of the reasons I said to you, Jean, I think it's great that you're leading these sessions, because we need more male advocates. And it's something that I talk to my sons about. Ms. Barr.
Yeah, I'm Ms. Barr. Sorry, go on, and then I'll
just that's what I was going to say. Just picking up on that. So I'm the only girl. I've got 4 brothers, and I'm the only one that went to university and got a career and stuff like that. And I've got 2 nieces now, so we had the first girl in the family after 30 years. And my eldest brother was like, I want her to be like you. And I don't think he's realised how strong-willed I am yet. He might regret that decision. And I think that's really important. And I think, like, for me, like, I've got loads of like women in the family. I've got like loads of like female friends and stuff. And I think it's really important to build that network, but also be able to show that you can do it, like that they've got someone to aspire to, someone to look up to. And I think traditionally women would stay at home, like my mum, like, that doesn't work. And I remember when I first started in my career, and my grandma used to be like, what do you mean you're going away to a conference? Are you going to speak in front of people? Like, it's even like culturally, like, it was so like different, and trying to like even come across like those barriers and things was quite difficult at the beginning. But I think it's really important. And I think the stuff like this podcast, the networks and networking, mentorship, I think it's all really important, and it is really raising that awareness. And we've got so many strong female leaders now as well, that we can really aspire to be like them and look out for them as well. And I think that really does help as well. So it almost feels like you're not alone.
No, thanks for that, Ms. Barr. And Jess, you're saying, are you outnumbered as well in relation to siblings?
Yeah, everyone in my family is a boy. I have 2 brothers. I have 4 boy cousins. 6. All of the our extended family, like our friends, they're all boys. And then me randomly appearing, which my granddad's joke for many years was, "You are my favorite granddaughter." It's like, yes, I am the only one.
I'm your only.
Is fantastic. That is a fantastic joke.
Brilliant. It's quite interesting with sort of saying like this. And Liz, you saying about sort of like, like sort of promoting men sort of like as advocates, because when I came up with this idea sort of towards the end of last year, and I had a number of different inspirations, one being the Evelyn Dunsmore sort of foundation. Liz, you'll know about. Jess, and you're nodding there, you probably know about the Evelyn and Ms. Barr, and we will be doing some work in relation to that, and we will be ongoing and trying. I want this to become a regular feature, the Women in Health Tech, and I will make sure it does. But someone actually said to me, surely you should be getting a woman to host these sessions. And I didn't know how to take that. I started worrying then, because it really put me in a bit of a sort of dilemma. And I don't know why. Sonia, my wife, was like, why shouldn't you be sort of doing it? And because I was thinking to myself, oh God, should it be a man doing it then? This is Women in Health Tech. And should I get sort of like, I don't know, Kay Reynolds or Liz or Jess or Ms. Barr or someone to sort of like to do these? And I don't know why I sort of sat and sort of pondered this. Bit of an odd one, really, Ms. Barr.
Yeah, I just want to say, when I met Shane at summer school last year, it was the first time that we had randomly sat together on the table, and I hope he does listen to the podcast. So
he will watch
this. Sat on the table, and it was the first time I'd spoken to a male done so well in the health tech industry that was so supportive of women, and it was so nice to have that conversation and listen to everything that he's done and the foundations he's set up and stuff, like, and that was initiated from him. It wasn't just because I was going on about it like I always do, and that was so nice and refreshing to see that. And it really was good to hear that, you know, women in health tech are being taken seriously, and there is foundations out there to support that. So that was really nice.
It's absolutely fantastic the work they're doing, and I was at the inaugural sort of meeting for the foundation, and we'll be supporting that sort of moving forward as well. It's fantastic to see.
But I think that kind of thing of like, shouldn't it be a man, shouldn't it be a woman who's hosting this is really, really common. And I think it's because if it's a woman's problem, then it's like, oh, it's only a woman's problem. Like, it's only women are experiencing this, so therefore only women can deal with it. And it's like, well, actually, you need the, as much as we can stand up and like, exactly, I completely agree with what Liz is saying, like, be the person who younger girls aspire to be. You also need the other 50% of the population to be saying, yes, I also want you to be at the table. And, you know, like my supervisor upstairs through Channel Authority, he is amazing at this because he is way, 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 way more aware of when things are happening to me because of somebody being discriminatory than I am. I tend to be of the opinion that my immediate default assumption is I'm at fault. I'm like, I must have done something wrong. Like, the reason this is going badly is because I've done something. And like 9 times out of 10, he'll be like, no, they're doing that to you because they think they can get away with it because you're young and female. Let me step in and stop that from happening. And it's the same, like with Liz saying with her sons. And my brothers are the same. The oldest of my brothers, he now works in cybersecurity. And I remember when he first entered the workforce, he turned around to me, phoned me up one day and he said, Jess, this whole women in tech thing, I kind of thought you were just exaggerating. And now I see it every day. And I'm like, what on earth is happening in the world? And so now he will go out and say, hey, that's not okay. So you have to have advocates from both sides. Otherwise, it's too easy to dismiss it as being a woman's problem, or like you're just being a hysterical woman. If you have advocates from both sides, it's much harder to make that kind of dismissal.
And it's all it's going to do is alienate certain people, because it's almost giving that impression or giving the message that you know, this podcast is for women and only women are going to listen to it. And it's like, oh my God, if that's where we want to be, go and record a different podcast with different people, because that's exactly what I don't want it to be, because it's absolutely crazy. Mizpah, I know you have to leave us. Thank you ever so much for joining us and contributing to this. It's been absolutely fantastic. We're going to continue the conversations with Liz and with Jess. So thank you ever so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to listening to the rest of the conversation.
Absolute pleasure.
Thank
you ever so much.
Take
care. Thanks. Bye. So absolutely fantastic, and sort of like, you know, we're discussing around sort of raising awareness, isn't it? It's really interesting for me, sort of like, you know, encouraging it from sort of like, you know, that school age, training and upskilling as well. We've spoken about some of those challenges, people's journeys in digital health for women in health tech. And, you know, I mentioned just now about that sort of like that very insular sort of like, is this about women for women in relation to that? And obviously, I think within digital health, or within any organisation or within any sector, there's always challenges, and there's always going to be sparks and a bit of clashes where there's opposite poles, and from women interacting with other women. You're not all necessarily advocates or pushing in the same direction all of the time. So are there sort of like, you know, challenges in respect to that? Because obviously, you know, that this is the one conversation where I'm not a woman, and, you know, I know blokes and blokes can sort of, men can clash, but that sometimes ends up in sort of like different fisticuffs and stuff like that. Whereas women are a bit more sort of, you know, I don't know how to put it. What's the word I'm looking for?
I describe it as death by 1,000 cuts.
There you go.
There's no big punch. There's no big fallout.
Knives in the back.
Well, but it's lots of Jessie's is nodding. There's lots of little tiny nips, and it's painful. it's really painful. And I've reflected on why does it upset me so much more? And it's because it's not overt. And it's also, I think, because we feel that we can't talk about it because we don't want to put other women down or be seen to not be supporting women. And also it comes back to something that Jess said. If a woman isn't nice to me, I think I must have done something wrong. And so you internalize it. And so, and I think that the way that, and I've watched this, with my children, you watch boys growing up, and if they have a fallout, they might have a punch up or, push over, but then it's gone.
Yeah.
As a young girl, it's not like that on the playground, and it's still not like that. And my friends who have daughters see it, and unfortunately, sometimes those behaviours carry on into adulthood, and it's still really painful.
Yeah, I mean, I would massively agree with that. Like, I think there are complications. So, one, I think traditionally, because there has been, to come back to Ms. Bo's analogy, that because there has been less seats at the table, I think in some ways that has turned into, in the past, I think it's getting a little bit better, but a fairly unhealthy sense of competition, because there's a bit of if there's only one position for a woman, then I want it to be me. Whereas obviously where you want to be able to bring everybody up with you is the ideal, but it does breed this sort of unhealthy sense of competition. And I think in some ways, some of the initiatives that have gone in the past have made that slightly worse. Like when there have been I don't know, when they started doing things like awards that were for the best woman to do this or that, instead of this being like we're all in it together type of thing, it has sort of bred this sort of slightly toxic, unhealthy competition. And exactly like Liz says, the way that plays out with women is less like I'm just going to have a screaming match at you, and more like I know how to cut you down in the most painful ways possible, and I'll do it in an underhanded way. And it's very, very, very painful. It's also very hard to tackle because it's so not overt. You can't just turn around and say, oh, this person in my office is bullying me or harassing me, whereas actually it might be something else. So to give you an example, I had it several years ago when I was working in consulting. The woman manager and I did not get on. And so it got to the point where the rest of my team had actually made like a bingo card of all of the ways that she would undermine me in the meeting. So we had like and I can laugh about it now because I'm like, it's so ridiculous that. Like, yes. But what it was her feeling threatened by the fact that I was the only other woman there, and it was to her, it was like I was a direct threat to her position, and the only way she could react to that was by being sort of quote unquote catty. And you can't really challenge it in the same way that you can with someone who's being overtly like a bully or harassing someone, because it's so much subtler and so much harder to deal with. The other complicating factor, and this is the last thing I'll sort of say on this point, is it's a bit like what I was saying about the hysterical women thing. There's also, because there is such a perception, and there has been such a long-running perception that women are more emotional, or we're more this or more that. Sometimes you don't want to raise these problems in the workplace and say, I am feeling like this, or I am feeling discouraged, or I am feeling anxious, or I am feeling like any of these negative emotions that come from toxic work behaviors or come from being piled on or anything like that, because you don't want to add to the perception that you're being overly emotional. And so it's sort of like, reinforcing feedback system.
That's really interesting, because I think there's lots of different sort of like egos, characters, etc. within organisations, whether that be male, female. And I think my experiences in relation to relationships with peers and bosses that have been female is that I've actually been very, very cautious of certain people in relation to that, because I think certain characters or certain people, they know and potentially sometimes play that card that he's not going to have a go at me, or he's not going to sort of like, because I'm a woman. And I'm not saying that that's sort of like, right or wrong in respect to that, or maybe that was just me and my perception. But some of these really angry, sort of like powerful characters that are sort of like, that are putting that out there. And it can be difficult at times and very challenging. But I think it's coping mechanisms, and also that support where, we need to have, and from your experiences from both of you, sort of like, where do you turn to in those sort of times?
Yeah.
I think because it's very difficult, isn't it, to sort of like, having these issues. And if it is, say, Jess, in what you were saying, but if that was a whole team of women, does it make it harder? Would you like to sort of like just have a man in there to say,
do you know, Dean? I don't think it has to be a man. I think it needs a brave person to call it on your behalf. No, you're right. But I think so. Like the situation that Jess was in, it's an interesting approach to create a bingo card, which makes it funny. But underneath it all, I'm sure you went home and had tears. And I think one of the things that I know I've tried to do is, when I've seen inappropriate behaviour for somebody else, I find it far easier to call that out than I would do for myself. And so I've always tried to call it out if I see it for somebody else. And I think that, again, that's something that we can all do. Now, sometimes I will be in a room, for example, even if it's like in a personal environment, I'll say to my husband, did you see that? And he's missed it completely. He's missed that little slice that just happened. But as a woman, we know when it's happening. And really, we should be saying, I'm not quite sure that's appropriate, or just to have a separate conversation. And that is really difficult. But to call it out, I think, is on all of us to do that. And if somebody, as Jess said, I think it's so insightful, Jess, when you said we don't want to talk about it because then it makes us sound like we're being emotional. Well, do you know what? Women are emotional. That's part of our construct. And I probably wouldn't be screaming and shouting. I might cry. What's wrong with that?
Exactly. I mean, I think there are so many things to it. I think fundamentally, I actually think this is a point about diversity. Basically, the rules that apply in genetics, I think, also apply in the world of the social domain. So we know that genetically, you get stronger surviving species when you mix genes. That also happens, I think, in the social environment. When you have a lot of the same person, and that sameness can be in multiple different ways. It can be from your gender, it can be from other points of view. I think what happens in those scenarios is all of the worst characteristics, like stereotypes, exist for a reason. Like they become amplified because there is nobody in there who then says, hey, that is not okay, because we all just assume that this is sort of the way in which it behaves. So I went to, from 11 to 16, I was in an all-girls school, and then I was in a mixed school for sixth form, and the experience was wildly different because you get a sort of mellowing. But I think that happens in the workplace as well. The more we have of the same person, whatever that is, the more amplified all of the negative behaviors of that type of person become. And the better it is, the more diverse you have of a workplace, because it is easier to say, that's actually not normal. And so that's sort of point number one. And then point number two is very similar to what Liz was just saying in terms of the way in which we react. And I actually think this is one of the things that's potentially super powerful about the way in which we can apply things with digital tech, is I think we're in 2025. We need to recognize that people come to work as their whole self. You are not some kind of automaton that somehow turns off half of your personality, like in that show, when you turn up to work. You are still a whole person. You have emotions, you have health issues, you have feelings, you have a life that is happening outside of work. And actually, in healthcare, if you're working in healthcare and if you're working in digital technology, you want that recognition that everybody is a whole person, because you want that wholeness to be embedded in the thing that you are designing. If you are designing a diagnostic algorithm, for example, I want to know everybody else, what else is happening in your life, because there's a pretty good chance that I want my algorithm to ask those kinds of questions in order to get to the correct diagnosis. And if you are cutting off people's entire lives and reactions and expecting them to behave like this kind of stilted robot at work, and you only have one type of person who is building the algorithm, you're not going to get to the point where you have something that is asking all of those correct questions. And so I think that's really important reason why making sure we have a diverse workforce and making sure you allow people to turn up as their whole selves to the office.
Almost like the Truman Show, Jess, in relation to what it's, if you've seen that film.
Do you know that? I think that just on building on what you were saying there, Jess, and I don't know about you, but as a younger version of myself, I didn't have the confidence to bring my whole self to work. And I remember feeling exhausted going home from work, thinking, because I'm trying to be like my boss and, I'm trying to be like everybody else. And it's really exhausting. And I don't think you can really be as good as you can be when you're trying to be somebody else. And that's something I've seen over the last 10 years from founding ORCHA. And we recruit quite a few graduates, and watching graduates who are male versus female, it's been really interesting that the confidence that you see in the man is far greater in things like asking for salary increases, looking for a promotion. And that's admirable. I don't want to turn that off. I just want to turn it on in the counterpart woman. And I think and I don't know what we do about that ability to feel more confident to just be yourself, because I don't know what happened for me. I think I got to about 34 and thought, right, I'm just too tired, I'm just going to be myself. If people don't like it, okay, but I think I just had to get to a bit older to feel like I'm just going to be me now.
And it's really interesting you're saying that, Liz, because I think my confidence, and I am quite a confident person, I wear my heart on my sleeve. I always have done. But I think a lot of that has come from because I spent my mum was a stay-at-home mum. I spent all my time with my mum. She lives with me now. So sort of like, and she's a strong woman. She only comes in at 4'11", but blimey, you wouldn't want to mess with her in any way, shape or form. And she still puts the bejeebers up me, and I'm 51. So sort of like, but that's what gave me the confidence. And that's what gave me, and I think, and then moving that forward into my training as a nurse, surrounded by sort of, real and they were confident sort of like, women, and taking that forward into my nursing career. I don't think it was necessarily a lot of the men within my life that was my biggest influences. I think I'm trying to say, and that's a positive, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think with the confidence thing, and it's definitely been the same. So for me, I used to be selectively mute. I didn't really speak, and I was perfectly capable of speaking. But until I was about 18 or 19, I just didn't used to do it. Until I went to Oxford, and they don't let you not speak. So but also what it really was, that sort of unhooked it in my brain. And people will find it's like, if you come and see me at Rewired or anything like that, what I will still do is I will go up on stage and I'm talking about my work, and that is no problem at all. And then I will come off the stage and you will try and interact with me as a human, and I will clam up and I will not be able to look at you in the eye, and I will be and sometimes people think I'm being really rude. I'm not. I'm just being socially awkward. But what gave me the confidence to overcome that, and what Oxford gave me, and I think this is what I try and do with teams and people I see who are now in academia, is because it was the recognition of the value of my expertise. And I think what we tend to do with younger women in the workplace in particular is we devalue what they bring. and we teach them, it's very similar to what you were saying before, Liz. We teach them that in order to progress, you have to become something else. You have to learn how to behave in this way, or you have to develop this skill. And, you know, like we've had this conversation, and this whole thing is about tech, and we've mostly spoken about things like IG and coding and all of that type of stuff. Well, actually, we need all skills in order to make good tech. And we have to, therefore, anyone who comes into the workforce with whatever gender or ethnicity or anything, what is it that makes you tick, that you bring, that is your unique set of skill set? And I'm going to really value that. I'm not going to tell you that you have to become a manager and you have to become a really great people person if that's not what you want to do. I'm not going to tell you that you have to become a coder if what you are really good at is like writing policy. Like, I'm going to invest solely in making sure that you see the value of your unique skill set and your unique opinions. And that, I think, is where the confidence gap comes from, because women are told your whole entire life that your skill set is not as valuable as the ones that are inherently male. And so it's making that flip that I think is really important.
Yeah, I love that. I remember working with somebody, and it was a guy, and he said we all need to know what our superpower is and just get really, really good at that superpower. And that's really stuck with me. And part of that is also going, it's okay that I'm not good at everything.
Yeah.
You can't be good at everything. And that's part of this realization of just be who you are and just try and do the thing that you're really, really good at. And then for me, work with other people who've got superpowers in different spaces. And it comes back to your point about that diversity, not having, and I think that this is something that happens. I don't know the research behind it, but it's clearly a human behaviour that we put other people who look and sound like us in positions around us. And I think it's about having bravery or just having the insight to not do that. Because I think you're right, having teams that are very diverse is so beneficial for so many different reasons.
And it rings true in what you just said. And Jess, you were saying about these sort of like, you know, honing in on people, sort of like, you know, they're really sort of like those attributes and those things they're really good at. And I'm sort of sidetracking slightly, but as a clinical safety officer, there is an expectation that you know everything about everything in relation to the system that you are risk assessing. People expect, well, of course you know how it works from like every single piece of the functionality. Of course you know its entire integration and interoperability. Of course and all of this stuff. And it's like, I'm the clinical safety officer. I'm risk assessing. I should have a team of people sort of like access to who are subject matters experts in all of these areas that then I can utilize, and I can sort of, but there's this expectation, isn't there, that you are everything to everybody. It's interesting, but I like the whole superpower sort of like piece, because I don't know if you've seen Kay Reynolds' mugs. And
oh no, I've not, because I've not seen a mug.
And she's had mugs, and she's got on there, I am a digital clinical safety officer. What is your superpower?
Oh,
on there. So maybe we should all have mugs. So what I can do, you've got me thinking now in relation to this, that everyone on the panel needs to give me their superpower. That's what we're going to do. Now, we've discussed sort of a lot of topics and a lot of themes, but I'd like us to sort of end on the sort of a positive note and sort of celebrate women in health tech in relation to, and it would be really good to get some sort of views from yourselves around sort of, you know, whether it's on your journeys from the start of your journey in sort of health tech, or whether it's taking sort of an initiative or a piece of work or something that's happened, or your experiences in relation to that you feel has been a real positive sort of change or sort of advancement in relation to women in health tech, and that's really pushed forward the agenda in relation to that. Because we could sit here all day, couldn't we, going, we should be doing this and we should be doing that, and that's not right and this isn't right. But that's not what, necessarily why we're here. But we really need to be, because there's so much fantastic stuff that's happening in sort of like, whether it's femtech, or whether it is sort of like, initiatives to sort of push women forward. So it'd be really good to get sort of like, something from your own journeys and your own experiences in relation to that.
Yeah, I don't mind going first if you're okay, Jess. I think that there's loads of things that I could comment on, but I'm just going to pick two. I think the first is, where are we now when it comes to people who are using digital health technologies? The highest downloaded digital health app is a period tracker. Women are out there using these technologies today to track periods, either to not get pregnant or to get pregnant. It's been a long time since I was a pregnant lady, but I used apps all the way through my pregnancy and through labour and after. Women, and I'm now perimenopausal, and I'm now using technology to track my symptoms. So I think that the first thing is, women are real advocates for technology in our life, and in part it's because it's convenient, because we might not necessarily have the time to go to an appointment, but having it on our phone, we can use that at a time when the kids are in bed and all the jobs are done. So I think that that's really important. We're using it anyway. And then I think that the other thing is the online communities, I think, has just massively grown and supported women. And I'm part of a number of WhatsApp chats. And we sometimes get together, but just having a community to be able to reach out if you've got a question is so powerful. And just networks like the Shuri network, it's incredible. And you can be part of that wherever you are. So there is no geographical challenge. It's not, we're going to meet at 7:00 at night when a lot of women might need to be home with the kids. It's a network you can join when it suits you. And so I suppose what ultimately I'm saying is digital has helped. Digital has really, for me on a personal level, it's really helped me.
Thanks, Liz.
Yeah, I mean, I would largely echo that. I think that for women's experience in healthcare, and then just women's experience in sort of then working in health tech, I think digital has been and has the potential to continue to be revolutionary. As a general rule, I hate the narrative of empowerment, and I think it's overly simplistic, that the idea that you give somebody an app and then all of a sudden they're better able to help to manage their care. But I do think there's something incredibly powerful about putting that kind of tool in the hand of a woman, where you have historically had people dismissing your symptoms or saying, oh, this is not really real, or your pain is not really real, or like this must just be because you're pregnant, or your body wants you to be pregnant. And then actually you can say, well, no, I now have proof of all of the things that you were ignoring for years because women were not in clinical trials, because apparently it was too statistically complicated to deal with the fact that your hormones vary over 30 days. It's like, okay, well, now we can deal with that. And now we have all of the access to all of this data that we ignored for basically the entire history of medicine. And there is something so cool about that, especially when you combine it with the fact that, and I think people forget this, right? The most powerful consumer market that exists in the world, the people that want to grab hold of, is teenage girls. Right? Teenage girls are the most powerful consumer market that exists in the world. They drive pretty much all of the big businesses, especially in the digital environment. You combine that fact with the fact that healthcare for women can be really changed with the use of digital tech. I think the opportunities and the coolness of that is so exciting.
I did not know that fact, but now you've said it, I reflect on my friends who've got teenage girls, and they're definitely no end of packages being delivered to their home.
And it makes sense. It makes sense, doesn't it? It does. It makes sense. And you're absolutely right, Liz. Our girls, I am surrounded by girls in the house with sort of like, two daughters and a son. Sorry, two sons as well. I don't want to forget about them. but Francesca is at home still. She's the only one that's at home. It's fixed to her hand, I think. And like you say, all the packages coming in, etc., and stuff like that. Do you know what? It'd be really interesting, Jess, because what I am going to do when she comes in, I'm going to have a chat with her and I'm going to say to her, do you have any femtech that? Not sort of quizzing her and all that stuff, because she'll go, Dad, go away.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about it.
No, she'll just be like,
but she probably will have. I don't know how old she is, but she probably will have.
Yeah, she's 25. She's 25. So, you know, she's bound to have sort of like some stuff and everything. But it'd be really interesting to sort of get her point of view, and I can bring some stuff to the next panel sort of discussion and sort of say, Fran's just been asking about or whatever and stuff like that. I think it's really powerful, isn't it, to be sort of like part of that and to be supportive.
And on the topic of that, I think this is why we're also passionate about the opportunity and the challenges when it comes to digital health. And from a woman's perspective, we're more likely to use these technologies, but yet we don't know what's happening with our data within these products. We don't know which ones are trustworthy, which ones are safe, which ones are effective. And actually, we're all trying to make sure that anybody who wants to use one of these technologies gets one that is safe and effective.
Totally,
but particularly young people who are going to be the future using these technologies. And, you know, I still think, even though in the women's health strategy there was not one single reference to digital, I think it's something that we should really all be pushing to say, women are already using these things. They want to use them.
And I don't think the awareness, and I might be throwing this out there, but I think sort of like people of a certain age have a bit more common sense in relation to, and a bit more awareness around what's happening with your data, what's not, etc. Whereas I think your average sort of late sort of teens, and do they necessarily? I don't know.
Well,
I get the impression that
it's interesting, because my youngest son is 11, and he'll talk to me about data security because they learn about it at school.
Well, that's fantastic.
But he talks about it theoretically, but he'd probably download anything.
Well, this is what I'm saying.
So the behaviour doesn't necessarily match the understanding.
And that's where I'm coming from, Liz. And no, thank you for that. I think it's the behaviours, isn't it? Yeah. Around, yes, we know about it, but, you know, myself and you, Liz, you know, and even Jess, we're in that space, aren't we, of sort of like where it's in the forefront, information security, governance, cyber security, etc. So we have more awareness and we have a duty in relation to that. However, we need to sort of, that needs to cascade down, doesn't it? And the implications of, like, you know, exactly what we're doing. And that's great. Thank you ever so much for, I think we're coming to sort of like the end. I know we could sit here for hours sort of like chatting and discussing, and I wish we could. It's been a really fantastic session with all of you, and with Ms. Barr as well, for that first hour. Before you go, Liz, you know the question I'm going to ask. So in true The Only Way is Ethics fashion, is that just putting you both on the spot just one last time. And if there is just one message from what we've discussed on here, or one takeaway for the audience, apologies, Jess and Liz, putting you on the spot. What would that be? And I'll start with you, Jess.
I think my one sort of message, we were talking before about superpowers. I think that your being you is your superpower. So my one sort of takeaway, and anybody listening to this podcast, is that whoever you are as a person, that's what makes you a superpower, and that's what makes you useful and beneficial and hugely valuable to the world of tech. Because if we're going to design tech to work for everybody, that means we have to have everybody building it. And so don't let any subliminal or overt messages tell you that you are not supposed to be in this space. You are supposed to be in this space.
I was going to say, be who you are, just be you. But what I'm going to say is help other people to be themselves and just who they are, particularly if you've been on that journey yourself. and you can see that maybe somebody isn't feeling confident enough to get there, help them through mentorship, talking about your own challenges, and help others.
Fantastic. That's brilliant. And again, thank you ever so much for joining us on this panel. Panel 3 of our Women in Health Tech series for February. And I'm sure we'll be speaking again very soon, and we look forward to the rest of the panels. Thank you ever so much, Liz. Thank you ever so much, Jess. And look forward to catching up with you soon.
Thank you, Dean.
All right. Cheers. Thanks, guys.
Bye.